Hey everybody, and welcome back to another max velocity weather forecast. And in today's forecast, we'll be going over that massive severe weather outbreak that's expected tomorrow across portions of the United States that could bring strong and long track tornadoes to some areas. I'll give you the latest breakdown on timing, details of where it's all going to happen. Everything that you need to know will be in this forecast. Let's first begin with what's happening today and how this will translate to that severe weather outbreak for tomorrow. Beginning with the trough that is actually going to be what brings the severe weather. It's all the way back up in Canada, and it will stay up there over the next 24 to 48 hours. It is never going to really reach the United States, but this trough is going to have a cold front that extends all the way back down through the Dixie Valley and as well as through the southern plains. This will be actually the area where we see severe weather is going to be way down here, back in areas like Mississippi, Alabama, Arkansas, Louisiana, Tennessee, Kentucky, all included in this potential for severe weather. So it's a very elongated cold front, very strong trough as well for this time of the year that we're watching that will bring the severe weather threat. So ongoing today is that snow back up really in far northern portions of the United States, but eventually going to tomorrow, all this moisture, instability will all kick out of the Gulf of Mexico, which will eventually fuel that storm potential heading into tomorrow, which could bring very severe storms, potentially against some strong and long track tornadoes. So make sure you have a way to receive alerts tomorrow, because it will be a very busy and dangerous day for sure across those areas. And the Storm Prediction Center has already issued a moderate threat for severe weather. This is the red shaded area that indicates that this is the second highest level on their scale. It primarily includes northwest Mississippi, but does extend through extreme eastern Arkansas, extreme northeastern Louisiana, and extreme southwestern Tennessee. There is an enhanced and slight risk that still has to be watched for very closely for all modes of severe weather outside of that go through Tennessee and all the way back through East Texas, and a marginal threat which still does include all modes of severe weather. The biggest concern for right now is that potential for strong and long track tornadoes, especially in that red shaded region and the hatched area. The hatched area represents the potential for EF2 plus tornadoes, a 10% chance within a 25-mile radius across this area. So again, make sure you have a way to receive alerts. I cannot urge that enough. It's going to be a very active and busy day tomorrow, so be prepared. Also, the wind threat is also going to be kind of significant in some areas. It's going to primarily occur across Mississippi, so it seems like Mississippi at this point will have the greatest chance for some extreme severe weather, especially in the northwest side of the state. Again, that hatched area representing your potential within a 25-mile radius of 70-mile-per-hour winds or greater. So the jet stream over the next few days is kind of something to be watching for. It's pretty important. Again, it's not dipping that far down to the south. Typically with these events, we have a trough way down here in the southern or central plains. In this case, the trough is all the way back up here in areas like Minnesota and Canada. It is going to be negatively tilted, which will create a better chance for severe weather as well. So kind of an interesting note there. This is not a typical severe weather setup by any means, but it is definitely be something, again, to be watching for very closely. Now, heading into today, later today, this is the dew points. They're not going to be that impressive. We're talking about dew points in the upper 40s, low 50s. You might be thinking, if you're going outside today, it's not that sticky outside. It's pretty, it's kind of on the dry side. But if we go closer to tomorrow, all this moisture out of the Gulf of Mexico is going to surge. Dew points are going to jump 20 to 25 degrees in the matter of about 12 hours. I mean, it's going to be a pretty significant difference from really the prior day. So be mindful of this as well. It's going to be humid tomorrow. You will really feel it outside as well. By late Tuesday evening or so, we're still going to have dew points in the upper 60s and low 70s. This will create a lot of buoyancy, which will translate to, again, a pretty substantial severe weather threat. And the instability is a pretty important part of the severe weather event as well. Instability is almost like putting gasoline into a car. It basically fuels these storms to be able to develop and also strengthen. So looking at the instability going into late tomorrow, it's going to really ramp up. Again, we're going to have instability values between 1 to 2,000 joules per kilogram. That is a lot of instability. That will really translate, again, to a lot of severe weather, at least a lot of storms, but obviously the severe weather potential will still be pretty high on the scale, again, due to all the really ingredients coming together. Also, the low-level jet, which is basically our lower-level winds to be able to rotate some of these supercells, is also going to be very, very high. I mean, we're talking still 50 to 60 knots on the low-level jet. That will really be able to crank these storms and be able to have some of them rotate as, again, they move across areas like Arkansas, Mississippi, Louisiana, and Tennessee. And once we put all these ingredients together, we look at the significant tornado parameter, which gives us an idea of what the tornado threat will be tomorrow. And really, it's quite impressive. We don't really see this ever, where we have all this red and pinks that are kind of showing up in here, which indicates a higher tornado threat across these areas, which would again include areas areas like western Mississippi, northeast Louisiana, and eastern Arkansas. And again, that tornado threat will continue primarily during Tuesday afternoon and evening into early Wednesday morning. Really, it's going to primarily be up until about midnight Tuesday into very, very early Wednesday morning is when we'll have that potential for a few tornadoes. Again, a few of those could be strong. Also, let's go into the timing. Let's begin with Louisiana. We'll go through every state. Eventually, by about 10 to 11 o'clock, we'll have storms firing up during really as early as late morning hours. The severe weather threat will really increase during the afternoon, but you can see a couple of these little hooks here. That's going to represent the potential for, again, a couple of these rotating supercells. By the late afternoon, we'll have a lot more storm activity, a lot more of these hook shapes that you're seeing on these storms. That's where we'll have the greatest tornado potential. And eventually by 9 to 10 o'clock, we'll start to kind of clear out a little bit in Louisiana. We could still see a couple of storms if you're in eastern Louisiana near Baton Rouge and New Orleans, and eventually going closer to the overnight hours. Most of those storms move off to the east. Severe weather threat will dwindle probably after midnight. Also going through Arkansas, a lot of the severe weather is going to fire up during the early to mid-afternoon hours, but it will not be too bad, I don't think, for at least most of Arkansas. If you're on the very far eastern portion of the state, that is where we could see a very much higher tornado threat. If you're back near Little Rock, I don't expect as much in terms of severe weather. Storm activity will primarily probably be during the really the late morning in that area, and it'll eventually clear out. Back through Mississippi, this is the hot spot for tomorrow. Going into the afternoon hours, we'll have a lot of storms really starting to fire up. Eventually by about 6 to 7 o'clock is when I think they'll have probably a greater tornado threat. Eventually going closer to 9 to 10 o'clock. Still a lot of storm activity ongoing. Again, any of these storms really could be severe with the environment that we have. Going into the overnight hours, again, we'll have more of a damaging wind threat as this moves through areas like Alabama and Georgia, but tornado threat should start to lower as those storms move up to the east. And the last area we'll cover going through Kentucky and Tennessee, South Illinois, and as well as South Indiana. Going through the afternoon and evening hours closer to 8 o'clock, we'll have some storms firing up. A couple of these could be rotating. We could see a couple of tornadoes out of those. Again, tornado threat's a bit lower the further north we go up through this region. Going into the overnight hours, a lot of rain is expected. A couple of storms could still be rotating. Going through about past midnight, we'll probably start to have a very, very low tornado threat at that point, if not close to zero. And after tomorrow, heading into Wednesday, there still will be a marginal threat for severe weather from about West Virginia back through Florida. So still be mindful of this. If you're anywhere in these states, you might see isolated damaging winds, maybe a brief tornado, but it should be primarily just an isolated damaging wind threat. And also, will we see a cool down out of this entire system? Well, yeah, we will. We'll see a little bit of colder weather for some areas. It won't be very long lasting. It'll be pretty brief, but the biggest impacted areas will be areas like Wisconsin, Michigan, as well as Illinois. Basically, the Midwest will have the biggest impacts from this trough. Might even see some snow back up in those areas, by the way. And eventually going to Friday and Saturday, going into the weekend, maybe another trough brings some colder weather to the Midwest again. So hit the like button down below, subscribe if you've not already. This forecast is brought to you by Platinum Contracting.